Hi everyone, my name is Anna and I'm a postdoc at the Irish Centre for Research in Applied Geology, and I'm also part of the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in Geoscience initiative, also known as EDIG, and you may have come across us in the last 6 months or so. Now, EDIG was originally formed by a group of researchers who wanted to better understand the experiences of minoritized geosciences in the larger geoscience community. Now, this was sparked by our own personal experiences and mostly related to sexual harassment at international conference. And they quickly went from an internal EDI conversation to a much broader and inclusive initiative. Now, our aim was to promote effective and long-term change, and also to help our community become more inclusive and equitable. So to do this, we actually launched a survey exploring prejudice, inequity, bias, exclusion, sexism, and discrimination. So I'm going to present to you now a summary of the preliminary results of this survey, and I'm going to pick out some of the major trends which are specific to geosciences that seem to emerge from this data set. I'll start with the demographics of the survey respondents, and then I'm going to move on to the experiences and the main themes that come out of the data. We also organised a conference in December 2020, which we hope will be repeated this year, so keep an eye out. And during the talks and the discussions we had at the conference, it actually came to light that the intersectionality of many of these barriers are complex and difficult to untangle. We discussed the importance of coming together, embracing our vulnerabilities, and using our own personal strengths with intent to support various minoritized groups within geosciences. We also discussed the importance of mentorship in not only attracting, but retaining underserved minority groups of people. We learned how to build safer workspaces by becoming an effective ally and an active bystander. But a key message from the conference was the importance and the power of talking openly about all of these issues. These discussions can be very difficult, but the best way to start to dismantle the many barriers that exist in geoscience is to listen, learn, and come together to act. So the survey results, we had actually 708 responses to our survey, which is a great number and a really valuable data set. It was filled out from people from 58 countries. In the interest of time, some categories have been grouped together, particularly those with limited responses. So the demographics of the survey data, it's important to keep in mind which groups responded to the survey and in what proportions when discussing the results of the survey. So it's useful for us to know which groups we reached and which groups we need to reach in further surveys. So in terms of age range, the majority of people were from the range of 18 to 45, with the smallest group over 60s at 9%. 60% of respondents identified as male, 37% as female, 2% as non-binary, and less than 1% as agender. 75% of people identify as heterosexual, 11% as bisexual, 4% as asexual, 3% as lesbian, 2% as gay, and 2% as pansexual. For ethnic background, we've taken into account respondents from mixed ethnicities. So the final number in this chart is actually 818 as opposed to the 708 respondents. Now, 82% of respondents stated they were from a white background, with 8% from mixed or multiple ethnicities, 7% from Black backgrounds, 6.5% Hispanic or Latinx, and several other smaller groups recorded, particularly in the complete data set that we have as well. The respondents were replying from a variation of countries. So we have 58 different countries in the total data set. So for the sake of this slide, we've grouped them into continents. So 44% of people were replying from Europe, 39% from North America, 7% from Africa, as well as people from Oceania, Asia, and South America. But we also asked people if they were applying from their country of origin, and this information might reflect in people's experiences. So 43% of people who are working in Oceania were not in their country of origin. Similarly, in Asia, 31% of people working in Asia were not in their country of origin, and 12% of people in Africa. We provided a really extensive list of occupations for current or recent employment. Here they've been amalgamated into sectors. So 59% of people come from academia, 21% from the industry or the private sector, and 7% from government or NGOs. But more specifically, we asked people which sector of geoscience they worked in. Now the top 10 are displayed here. 12% of people work within economic geology, 10% within paleontology, stratigraphy and sedimentology, and 9% from geochemistry, mineralogy and petrology, and 9% from environmental sector. Now, that was a brief representation of our demographic data, and now I want to share a representation of people's experiences and the various issues within the geoscience. So of our total data set, 58% of people said that there are issues with prejudice in their workplace. 73% of people said there are issues with unconscious bias in their workplace. And 58% of people said that there are issues with inequity, exclusion, and discrimination in their workplace. Now we can clearly see from these results that there are significant issues that need to be addressed within the geosciences. When it comes to incidents that people witness or experience, a very significant 86% stated they have witnessed incidents of prejudice, inequity, conscious and unconscious bias, exclusion, and other forms of discrimination. And 28% of them said that they frequently witness these incidents. 72% of people said that they themselves had experienced discrimination in some form, with 19% frequently experiencing an incident of some form. Now, while I can say that these results might not be surprising to some of us, they clearly show the need for discussion and action and change. Next, we asked the respondents to select the types of incidents they've experienced most frequently. So 30% of respondents who stated they had experienced issues experienced gender-based issues. 18% experienced sexual harassment, 15% discrimination based on professional or job status, 10% racism, 8% ableism or disability, including mental health. Now, it's really important to note that these issues affect different groups in different proportions. So this is going to be looked into in much greater detail in light of the demographic data for the survey. We also offered people the chance to share details of their experiences in an open question, which allowed us to gain further insight into the nature, the frequency, and the extent of the different issues that people have experienced. So when we ask the question, where does discrimination occur? It doesn't occur only at conferences, such as the conference that prompted the EDIG committee to take action, but it also occurs in the workplace, both past and present, as well as during fieldwork, to name just the top few examples. If we look into demographics by age, the geoscience community over the age of 60 is predominantly white. Now, below the age of 60, the geoscience community is seemingly more diverse. But this doesn't seem to have changed or made any progress over time. So why do we think that this progress has stagnated? Is this related to the leaky pipeline and problems of retention in geoscience? If we look at discrimination by age, discrimination due to disabilities in the top 5 people below the age of 46. And it's only second after gender discrimination for people below the age of 30. For people over the age of 46, people start to feel discriminated against because of their age, and discrimination due to disability isn't in the top 5. Again, we need to start asking why. Are we seeing increased diversity in the geoscience community, or does this also reflect a leaky pipeline as people with disabilities leave the geosciences? Now, I've only pulled out one trend there in this data set, but there are many more questions that we could ask. For discrimination by gender, for people who identify as female and non-binary, gender discrimination is the dominant form of discrimination experienced. This is closely followed by sexual harassment for women and disability for non-binary, although the sample size for people who identify as non-binary is much smaller. For people who identify as male, there's not a dominant discrimination experience, but a more equal split between professional job status, racism, ages, and socioeconomic factors and gender, with 9% of men experiencing gender discrimination versus 39% in women. The majority of people in our survey who have experienced bias experience it from a supervisor or a colleague. Now, this raises the question of how can you report these problems when the person you're supposed to be reporting to may be causing the problem? Additionally, the proportion of people making an official complaint is very low, much lower than an informal complaint. So do current reporting procedures work? How effective are current EDI initiatives? There are a whole host of other areas I could talk about, but I wanted to emphasize these figures to highlight the need for discussion, action, and change. And finally, I wanted to share data about people's awareness of and perceptions on EDI initiatives in their places of work or study. Now, 76% of respondents replied that yes, there were EDI initiatives in their workplace, but only 77% of those respondents knew what these initiatives actually were. And when asked about the effectiveness of these initiatives, only 14% of respondents stated that the initiatives were actually effective. 13% said they weren't effective, and 47% of people were unsure. So most people don't seem to be engaging with these EDI initiatives, or they are unsure if they are effective. I'm going to leave it there for today, but I hope that these results really stimulate a discussion at the Metamorphic Studies Group today. There's certainly lots of different avenues to talk about. I would like to end by saying thank you to everyone who's been involved in the survey and the conference, particularly the EDIG committee and all of our supporting partners. If anybody wants to reach out, please contact us at EDIG at icragcentre.org or engage with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you, and we are planning future research around these topics, so please do get in touch. And I'm going to leave you with a kind of a word cloud that we did at the conference, just to look at what does EDI in geoscience mean to you. Thank you very much.